Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Visionary Improviser Adam Rudolph. We caught up with him in early May 2020 during the COVID-19 shutdown of no live jazz and a very surreal world to talk about his newest 2020 CD, Imaginary Archipelago, released on May 1st. It features 3 visionary musicians that make up the Karuna Trio, coming together in a singular voice. Adam is a deep cat that always has very wise and welcome insights, much needed in this world that is craving silver linings and brilliance. Enjoy.
I think it's probably good to talk about music during this time, so thanks for taking a minute out. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking a minute.
Well, actually, that was more on a personal note. I would say in terms of something to share with the listeners, I find that it's kind of deeply personal how everybody is handling this, you know. And of course, the first thing is, you know, that for myself and my family, we're trying to stay safe and sensible, right, in a very practical way. But the challenges for all of us, you know, there's body, mind, and spirit. And I think for myself, it's trying to use this time, you know, for reflection and thoughtfulness and whatever kind of transformation. You know, it's funny because we perform, but then also we compose and generate and practice and prepare. And so actually that part of life has been similar. But I think this sort of forced isolation for me has been like an opportunity to kind of increase reflection on the fact that everything is, the nature of the universe has changed and we don't really have control, and except we can try and evolve in our own, I'm trying to evolve my own personal view of things and sort of deepen my awareness. And I think everybody's going to hopefully use the time. It's not that this is beyond being safe, but kind of actually, and I think it is. I think it's going to be very transformative, perhaps, you know.
I agree. You know, and I think the unique thing about reaching out to the community, especially with musicians that are putting albums out, it has to be bittersweet. You know, on the one hand, you're putting material out during a time of quarantine where people can probably or listen to music more readily and maybe focus on it in a different way, but you can't back it up with live music and shows. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, they're all different entities, right? And live music is live music, and as you know from listening to the Imaginary Archipelago, our new release, that of the Karuna Trio, that it's not merely a document of a live concert. And all the energy of everything, of what happens, of being present when the music is unfolding at the moment, has its magic and its quality. So I think it's not even a matter of degrees. I just look at them as like as different as painting is from sculpture, or I don't know, or even more dramatic than that. So yeah, I mean, I think, but in terms of engaging, in lieu of the fact that engaging live music, like I myself, I haven't been really into the thing. I know a lot of musicians are doing sort of live online concerts, and I haven't done that. But I have sort of taken my creative impulse into, you know, generating a lot of these videos, making videos of the music that go with Imaginary Archipelago that we're putting out on Instagram. So if people want to, you know, if they hashtag my name, Adam Rudolph, they'll see those. And also we're trying to get people to come to the Bandcamp page of the Meta Records Bandcamp page so that they can hear the music and hopefully support the musicians. I mean, one of the things is that, I mean, everybody is grappling with their financial reality right now, but one of the things for sure is that for we who perform music do not have any selling of downloading and CDs and LPs is like right now is our only real outlet, a possibility to generate any kind of income at all. But you know, it's still good that just being involved in creative activity has a kind of nourishment, and that's what I was saying before. You know, I think maybe it's an opportunity for all of us to kind of think about what that means for us. I've always had the belief that creative imagination is a human birthright, and but it's been a challenge. The noise of the material world and the sometimes doesn't give us the space and the time and the silence to really nurture that.
You know, the one thing that I always try to ask and try to kind of tap into is how healthy jazz is. And I think during this quarantine, I figured out how healthy it is. The amount of shows and trips and live performances that have been canceled just with one or a handful of musicians is staggering. And I am just astonished, not in a way that, you know, following this craft and interviewing and being a part of radio, I get it. I see it. But I think for people out there, they need to understand, you know, I'm trying not to really delve too much into the devastation of all of these live shows that are canceled, but the amount of live shows and action that has been done by all you musicians is just absolutely staggering. Have you thought about any of that?
Well, okay, so yeah, that I think that it's a good point, and that's what I was speaking about before. So, yeah, I've had some tours canceled for this spring and summer, and also my orchestra, we have some concerts this summer and fall. So, yeah, it's impacted me, but what I'm saying is that's the reality, right? And so that doesn't mean, though, that creativity stops. And, I mean, what are you going to do? The reality is the reality. The shows, nothing's going to bring those shows back except when things, you know, as things move forward. And that's not really in our control. And it's important for me to understand the idea about control and not fall into a kind of despair. Everybody feels the grief of the world, I think, who's halfway tuned in. And that's there. But just because you're not playing a live concert, for me, doesn't mean that the creative impulse and the creative imagination and the desire to create goes away. I touch my drums every day. I'm composing music. I've gotten ready to mix a couple more recordings that are on hold, of course. And like I said, I've been involved in making videos now, little videos to go with the music of the Imaginary Archipelago release. So I'm staying involved in creative actions, you know, and I paint and draw, and so, you know, why should creativity stop just because concerts stop? I can't make the concerts not happen. So that's what I was saying. To me, to look at our own resources and to work and use the time as we can. I mean, I don't know. I don't have little kids running around. I don't have an online job that I'm tied to. So I don't know. This is for me how it's been working, and staying creative and generating things, making things, you know.
I absolutely agree. You know, and I got it on a personal note. You know, when this started, probably around mid to late March, I just, you know, it was really hard to focus on anything, even like listening to the radio. I mean, I just had to take a break and let my brain kind of calm down a little bit. And then I realized, you know, what I really want to do, and one thing I think is very important, is reaching out to you musicians and to really kind of do the best I can to capture the essence of this moment, A, B, and really try to do whatever we can do for a voice. I mean, I think one of the safest things that I've realized during this quarantine is radio. You know, there's no transmission of anything. It's the safest way, you know, through a phone call, through editing an interview down, through doing actual radio. And I find doing these shows every week, as much as I had to kind of think, you know, what am I going to do? It's been wonderful to pay credence to Bootsy Barnes and Lee Konitz, and I know Richie Cole wasn't a part of it, but that hurt really bad. Richie was a wonderful human being, and that there's just been so many of these guys that have left that have been a part, you know, Ellis Marsalis, and paying respects and being cognizant and reflective that, you know, this isn't something that we can just wait to go away. This is the new normal right now. This is our life. This is fighting through a pandemic, and jazz has always been the original protest music, and as far as I'm concerned, you guys have been some of the utmost practitioners of improv. I mean, what we're living through is the ultimate act of improv, and you guys are probably the most best suited in the arts to really deal with stuff like this.
Well, because, that's thank you. That's a nice thing to say, and of course we should also, mention the name of Wallace Roney, who passed away from the COVID-19 and was a young guy too. The other people you mentioned were elders. He was in his 50s. Very sad. There's the tragedy of it, but it's not to my trying to bend the conversation into something. Another way of looking at it is, and what you're suggesting is that of course these things exist, and we do have to be safe and sensible. Everybody has to make hopefully intelligent decisions about their behavior. So, but what it does mean, this self-quarantining, it does mean that there is this time for self-reflection and especially as the time continues on, and creative action, and that's what I feel about it. And to me, it's about what so-called jazz music, but it's about a bigger perception of things. So one of the interesting things about the music we play is that it is something that unfolds in the moment, and this sort of balance between relaxation and receptivity and generating this constant yin and yang that's happening is something that I find, the practice of that through the music is something that I find is there for us as human beings in general. Before, this idea of change, right? So we can look at change. The music changes, and it's evolved from the period of Louis Armstrong up until whatever, recently more, Miles, let's say, or Don Cherry, but also the idea of the what I call spontaneous composition, a word I prefer over the word improvisation. So spontaneous composition means that you are trying to be in tune with the naturalness of the moment, with your own nature, and tuning to nature, and understanding the organic quality of who we really are, and trying to be relaxed with that, accepting, and acknowledging the fact that change is the fundamental nature of the universe itself. And so a lot of us, we live with the illusion that there's repetition, and of course the sun comes up every day, and a lot of people go to work at the same time every day, these kinds of things that feel like it's the same every day, but in fact each day dawns but once, and understanding the nature of change and the nature of time, what time really is, as a phenomenon and not as a measurement, is all part of what we deal with in the music. So I believe that these are qualities that and one of the reasons people love the music, I think, is that they recognize that those qualities, they may not put a name on it, but they recognize the excitement of it. One of the things that we love when we hear a great musician performing spontaneous composition or so-called jazz is surprise, right? That, wow, look, did you hear what he just played, right? I mean, how is that unfolding, right? That's exciting. And surprise implies change, and it implies being in the moment and spontaneity and naturalness. So this is something that everybody can relax into. At least, I mean, like I said, I'm not really a fan of all these sort of preachy videos and everybody telling everybody what they should do. So I'm not trying to do that at all. I'm just saying how I look at it,
Oh, no, I never get that from you. In fact, I clearly remember our interview, and there's interviews that really, really stand out, and the level of intellect and depth that you get into is nothing to me about preachy. It's very, it's refreshing.
Yeah.
It really is. You have a beat on this life that is still very, very refreshing and illuminating. And one of my questions to you is this: out of the end of World War II and the race riots, we got a love supreme, and we got amazing music from very, very revered practitioners of jazz that we consider some of the greatest minds, and it came out of absolute adversity. So my question is, through this time, as raw and as good and as stealthy as jazz musicians are, what are your thoughts on innovation and rebirths of idioms in jazz?
I think I don't think about things in terms of cause and effect that way. And in fact, I'm not a really big fan of quote political, trying to have some kind of social or political agenda. And in fact, you said something earlier that was really, I would agree with, that so-called jazz, and as you can tell, I personally don't use the word relative to my own music, but anyway, I know what you're talking about, I think. But that you said it was, inherently a protest or political music inherently. So Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Monk, their music didn't have to be music of protest. It was inherent in the music itself, but it was bigger than that. And I think when you mention A Love Supreme, it's bigger than the protest movement and this, but it was in the spirit of the times, but it was also transcendent of it, right? That's why we can relate to it 50-some years later, you see? So it's not, people who were born who didn't even experience those times. So it was of those times, but it's transcendent of it. So I personally don't create music in reaction to anything that's going on, but of course I live in the time and place where I live, and this is what's happening now. But I'm not going to write, to make a silly example, I'm not going to write the COVID-19 suite, anything like that. But like I said, the expanded awareness of this powerful, powerful tsunami, psychological tsunami that's crashing down on everybody, of course, I don't need to respond to it. It's just part of my experience. Let me put it in simpler terms. The artist, for me, the artist is trying to express their experience in the time and the place that they live, and connect with and also dialogue with other times and places. In other words, music, when you really look at it, there's this thing about whatever the styles and the social content and the time. So this irony is that the more you develop your own voice and delve deep into it, the more universal your music can become. So you mentioned John Coltrane, or if I mention my mentors, Yusuf Lateef and Don Cherry, for example, the more they sounded like themselves, the more universally resonant their music could become.
I remember watching a Bob Dylan movie. I think Annette Bening was playing him, and at one point he was in a home, and the chambermaid was in there, and he was really, really straining hard over what he was going to write about. And he wanted it to just be this grandiose thing. And I remember she just turned around in this plaintive way and said, just write about what's around you right now. Write about yourself. It's just that simple. And it was an epiphany for him. It really, really revolutionized the way he approached music and what he did, and I always remember that.
There is a period, that's right, and there's a period where some musicians, there's imitation and emulation, and you're very aware of the styles that are going on around you, and that's what calls you into the music. I did come up in the 1960s, which, as we know, was and early 70s, I would say late 60s and early 70s, an amazing time, but I cannot play, and I love that music, but of course, that music can't be reproduced. That was the music of that time, socially, politically, mystically, all of those things. So what does that mean? That means that we take inspiration from, we can work with the understanding, the processes that those artists use, and the creative impulse, and the elements which are universal. So, Louis Armstrong is working with the same 6 intervals that Miles Davis is, or Don Cherry is in the late 1970s, right? But it's just being dealt with in a different way. In other words, music, and actually this orbits back around to maybe what you were asking before about what music is and might mean, not so much jazz in particular, but music in a broader sense. So working with those elements of music, so we talk about intervals, if we talk about rhythm, we're talking about color, which is harmonies and timbre, and, coloration of instruments and orchestration, and rhythm, which is our perception of the motion. But those things are a duality that really are what music is really about, and why music is magical, and that's even a trite word, is some kind of mystic, some power is this. It's vibration, right? Everything is vibration. We know that. There are things that are vibrating at a more grosser level, like a rock, and then there are things that are vibrating like light and even thought, right? So just to step back from a second and say, what an amazing thing that a human being can have an impulse to a hand. For me, my hand would strike a drum, or if Ralph Jones is blowing into his flute or saxophone, or Hamid Drake is striking his drum, these musicians on the Imaginary Archipelago, that those sounds, the impulse of any musician, that it goes into this, it enters this invisible realm of vibration, travels through the air, either coming from a speaker, a radio speaker, or live, as you said, and vibrates in the ear and through the skin of another person. And that person, you could potentially be moved to tears, or get goosebumps, or feel like dancing. That to me is like miracle enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That implies that the receiver, that the person experiencing that, whether they're listening to your radio show at home or listening to music at home or live, that it's about opening yourself to what that experience can be. So music, there's this idea of being a professional musician and, how we're affected by what's happening and these things. So professional musicians means that you making a living at it, and we're trade people that way, right? There's also the idea of music of what I call playing music, and that playful aspect. And so hopefully people that's the idea of the joy of it, the amateur, the amore, the love of it, playing it, the playfulness, the joy. Then there's the deeper thing of what I would call being music. And anybody can be music. What does that mean? Being music means being in tune, right? Being in tune with nature, with your own nature. It means being in harmony with your fellow beings on the planet, right? And it means being in rhythm. And being in rhythm means good health, right? Your body is moving. When your body is in rhythm, it's vibrating in your heart, your pulse, your breath, your everything, right? Your nerves, everything is, the electricity of is all moving in rhythm. That's good health, is rhythm. So to me, being music is being music is what I wish to evolve in. Being in tune, being in harmony, being in rhythm.
Well, let me ask you this. Everyone has what do you hope, what revelations do you hope we get when we get back on the stage, both for musician and the audience?
Well, that's a good question, and I feel like I sort of indirectly addressed it in a way, which is that we're humanity. It's going to be different. It is different, and it's going to always be different, right? And change is the fundamental quality of it. What I hope, relative to people's experience of music, but in general, is that this transformation that everybody is going through, whatever it means to each person, that it opens us up to, as I said, being more in tune with nature, being more in harmony, being more in rhythm, that that the transformation will make us, well, people will be kinder, more patient, more tolerant, and more open to what the power of nature and all of the things that we hope that it'll, manifest at this. And I'm not saying there's a meaning of this and there's nothing that happened for a purpose or reason, but that we have to bring the purpose, we have to bring the meaning to it ourselves. And to me, the more that humanity tunes into its aboriginal nature, which is the being in tune with creative imagination and being in tune with nature and respecting nature, our true nature as loving beings, and our true nature as being part of nature, and respecting nature herself, that if there's a little bit of a shift moving in that direction, that's going to be positive. Obviously, the alarm bells going off about global climate change did not bring this sense of humanity's togetherness. Maybe this will. I'm not naive enough to think it's going to be, but that's my hope for it, is that, and that music people will understand how significant and how powerful, as I described earlier, how significant music and all creative activity is. It's music. The artists have been marginalized in our culture because we're in a materialistic culture, right? In fact, when you look at the hundreds of thousands of years of human beings, and we know that that actually music and creative activity is at the center of what we really of what we can do and what is the best of what human beings can do. So I hope maybe there's some more awareness of that, and not just for anybody having a bigger audience, but for sort of the depth of involvement that people can have in creative, be active listeners, deeper listeners, or pick up an instrument and pluck a string, whatever it is you want to do, or pen to paper, those things, creative activity.
I love that answer. Hey, man, thank you. As always, it's refreshing to catch back up with you. Thanks for taking a minute out during this very surreal time on the planet.
Just before we go, I'm kind of like, I just want to say that people to be aware of this recording, right? You're going to play the recording, let people know, that there's this band, Meta Records Bandcamp page, right? That's our very pragmatic. Hamid Drake and I met when we were 14 years old in a drum store. Since 1969. We've been playing together on and off since that time. Ralph Jones and I met when we played at the Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival in, I think, 1973. So these are two of my closest and longest term music brothers, and associates. So there's a chemistry and a developed language. We've developed a language together, just like we can say so-called bebop is a language, right? And groups, this idea of the groups and musicians developing a language, and so that means there can be a high level of freedom and a depth and of communication and a chemistry that's really extraordinary, and I think that's reflected in this music on Imaginary Archipelago.
Beautiful. Hey, man, thanks again for taking time out. I really appreciate it.
Listen, man, you take good care of yourself too, brother. All right.
Thanks for listening and tuning into another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and artists in New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Adam for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.